About our actual project. So you can explain what we did to make this.
First of all, we had to get an idea, which at first Kiehlor and I had no idea what we wanted to do until Mr. Holt, who's in the back of the room, set us up with a meeting with Mr. Kari, and he's a retired high school teacher from Southwest High School in South High School in Minneapolis, and he helped us out, started just throwing out ideas, and he mentioned reserve mining in northern Minnesota, and that kind of got our attention, and we started thinking about it, and then just started general research, looked it up online, saw some things about it, and we moved on into deeper research.
The idea of History Day is to do primary source research, and to do that, we had a little bit of practice with this last year, or 2 school years ago, in 8th grade, when we did our first History Day project about Paul Wellstone. And what we found out is that you can find a lot of valuable primary source information by searching through old newspapers on microfilm at different libraries. We went to the Wilson Library, which is part of the University of Minnesota, and we also went to the Minnesota Historical Society Library at the History Center in downtown St. Paul. And we found some really interesting stuff. Where the Reserve Mining Company was in Silver Bay, Minnesota, up on the North Shore, they had a local newspaper called the Silver Bay News, which is like, how many people read that? 500 people who live in that town, and they actually had that newspaper on record all the way back to who knows when, to look at the Minnesota History Center. So we were able to look at those newspaper records and scan those and print them out and do our research through that, and that was really valuable.
After we sort of went to our both libraries and got a lot of things from online, and we started thinking about interviews, and because that's also a part of the process where you're trying to find some really good, valuable primary research, and what's better than an interview. And we started thinking about who would be one of the most important people in the whole project, and that would be, we chose Grant Merritt, who was right there, and Miles Lord, and then
Grant Merritt was the director of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency in the 1970s, and so he was a really interesting person to talk to, and we videotaped our interview with him so we could go back later and kind of take notes and quotes and things like that. In fact, I think we have 1 or 2 quotes from him up on our exhibit, so you kind of get the idea of what we went through with our research process, is kind of gathering information from people and narrowing it down to things we wanted people to see on our exhibit that kind of captured the reserve mining controversy. And you're only allowed to have 500 of your own words on the actual exhibit, so that's geared at
putting like an essay on that.
Yeah, it's supposed to encourage students to put up primary source information like quotes and things like that. And so we have lots of quotes and pictures and diagrams and maps and things on our board, and that kind of illustrates the whole controversy. Why don't you grab the newspaper thing just to show them. We found over probably 70 different newspaper articles, and with all the sources combined, we had over 100 different sources that we looked at, and then put them all together in an annotated bibliography.
And when we organized them, since there were so many, we just organized them by years, and all the way up to the heat of the trial in 1974, and And then we also found some articles from like 1982, I believe. Or, yeah, 1982. All the way up to there, which was kind of a total conclusion of.
If you guys aren't really familiar with the reserve mining controversy, we kind of prepared a quick little, in a nutshell, summary of the reserve mining controversy. The background and the board, you can kind of see how the board walks you through this. It starts on the left-hand panel with background about the topic, moves to the middle panel, which is what we call the heart of the story, which is basically, in this case, the trial and all of the conflict around the conflict and the controversy around the reserve mining pollution. And then the right-hand panel talks about the impact that the case and the controversy had, the lasting impact it had after it was over. So why don't you talk about the background?
Let's see. Well, right after World War II, our nation had used tons of our iron ore, which is used to make steel, and the economy of the northern part of Minnesota was depleting, and they needed a way to stay in business, and the answer to them was taconite, and it had to be processed since it's only 1/3 iron ore, so they have to break it down, and this relatively simple process of like crushing it and then using magnets to extract the ore and putting it into these pellets and things like that.
This is taconite.
Can't really see it.
We picked this up in Silver Bay
From the Reserve Mining Company. We just stopped at the gate and asked them if they could give us a sample of their product.
It's pretty hard to see. You can pass it around if people want to look at it.
Don't breathe it in. It's got asbestos.
Yeah, that taconite purification process was engineered in the 40s and 50s by U of M scientist E.W. Davis. He kind of engineered an efficient way to process taconite into pure iron ore, or those pellets. And then in the 1950s, I can't remember if it was 54, 55, something like that, the Reserve Mining Company opened, and that was kind of a big economic boom for that part of the Iron Range, and so lots of people got jobs. Silver Bay was born, actually, at that time. Silver Bay wasn't a town until the Reserve Mining Company opened. It was built by the Reserve Mining Company. It was a company town. Everyone who lived there worked at Reserve. Yeah, well, by the 1970s, 95% of the adult population there worked in some way for the Reserve Mining Company. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see. That's pretty much the background, and then we start out with the controversy, which in 1968 the Stoddard Report came out. There was a conference in Duluth which dealt with water quality that was going into lakes, that was in Lake Superior, and the problem was Reserve Mining was dumping all their taconite tailings into Lake Superior, which was polluting it, and these little particles, which are like in that picture right there, were
Microscopic.
yeah, that was microscopic, are in the water, and they're asbestos-like fibers, and they can cause, or are assumed to cause, cancer, just like asbestos can. And that started off, firstly, a fish crisis, because fishing went down after Reserve Mining opened, and fishermen started to notice these things, and
At one of the Duluth conferences on the pollution, this was probably around late 60s, actually 1969, okay. Walter Spey, who was a commercial fisherman in the Silver Bay area, spoke at one of these conferences, and you can imagine what kind of criticism he would have been facing from his fellow fishermen, or his fellow Silver Bay residents who worked at Reserve, because this was threatening their livelihood. But he testified, in October 1956, I caught 150 pounds of herring per net per day. By October 1958, this number had dropped to 48 pounds per net per day, and by 1959, it had dropped to 11 pounds per net per day. So that is kind of a big visual impact when you think about how much of a loss that is for him in his fishing business. And that was, he thought, due to Reserve's dumping of 67,000 tons of tailings into the lake every day. Oh, okay. There were lots of people who were outraged by this kind of large-scale pollution, and this kind of coincided with the environmental movement in the early 70s. The EPA was just created, Environmental Protection Agency, and there were just starting to be people really caring about the environment. So certain people decided to press charges or bring the Reserve Mining Company to court, and it ended up going to federal district court, where Judge Miles Lord presided over the proceedings in 1974, and that's kind of the major famous lawsuit that people think of when they think of the Reserve Mining controversy, although there were dozens of different trials and things like that. But go ahead.
The trial, I believe, lasted like 13 months, something like that. It was a pretty long trial, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was pretty, yeah.
And in April of 1974, the verdict or result came in, and Reserve was temporarily ordered to close, only to be reopened 2 days later. And that kind of sort of upset Miles Lord in our interview. We were pretty surprised. We asked him, what kind of impact did the trial have on Reserve Mining? He right away said nothing, because he was just so angry that he didn't accomplish what he wanted. But we felt something was accomplished.
Yeah. So through all this research, after kind of figuring out what this whole controversy was about, we kind of formed our thesis, which is a major part of the History Day process. And you're supposed to kind of have your thesis clearly displayed. I think that we kind of accomplished that up there, the big print. Our thesis is: the classic struggle between economic and environmental concerns was epitomized by the Reserve Mining controversy, in which environmentalists triumphed and paved the way for future ecological progress, but left in their wake the tragic devastation of a company town. And so that's what all our research revolved around, and it was basically the conflict between the Reserve Mining Company, which had all this economic control.
Literally controlling.
Yeah. Yep, they kind of controlled the town of Silver Bay and Babbitt, Minnesota, actually, which is not talked about as much. But so the Reserve Mining Company versus the environmentalists, who, although there weren't too many in Silver Bay, but there were people on the outside looking in who said, this is not right, this is killing fish, this is hurting the environment, this is causing danger to people's health. Yeah, he kind of hinted to this earlier, but it wasn't until midway through the trial that they discovered the asbestiform particles that can cause danger to human health, and that kind of put the trial going in a new direction. It was
Fish health, it's almost than the human
Right.
drinking water that's endangered.
Yep. Oh, and this.
Explain that.
Oh, that, well, looks like a milk carton, but it's a water carton, was handed out to Silver Bay citizens once they found the asbestos-like particles in the water by the United States Army Corps of Engineers as a safety precaution. Also, they installed filters in schools and restaurants and other things like that. We should probably move on to impact, which is the third panel to the right. At first, we had a little trouble finding impacts since it wasn't so, like, completely obvious. But we finally started looking at it and we realized that it changed a lot of things for the environmental movement, kind of got it, like, rolling in a way, and that would be the positive part of the impact. But there was
The triumph.
the triumph, yes, but there was a tragic part of the impact, which was Silver Bay literally became a wasteland, because people, like right after the trial, people just started moving right out of Silver Bay, sensing my job's in danger and things like that. But the problem was they couldn't sell their homes because no one was going to buy a house there if you couldn't work. And so a lot of people just deserted their homes and things like that.
Another impact on the town that we discovered in this book that we found at the Historical Society was a study that University of Minnesota Duluth students did on the people of Silver Bay. And there was kind of this long period of dragged out controversy starting in 1968 and going all the way into the early 80s. And throughout that time, especially the early 70s and up till the trial and the decision, they found in this study that drug use, divorce rates, and just general conflict was kind of on the rise in Silver Bay. Can't remember what else there was, but there was a significant rise in divorce rates, which we thought was really interesting. And so that was kind of the tragic impact of that. And I think now we're gonna.
Want to do the video?
Yeah.
This is
This is a video. Just kind of shows the national scope of how big this news actually was. If a lot of you people were probably alive in the 70s and you might have seen this on the news. It was a really big deal. And this just illustrates that. This is the NBC Evening News in 1974. I think it was in April or May, right after the decision. And yeah, it's pretty short. So.
It will make another ruling tomorrow on a classic pollution case, the case of reserve mining of northern Minnesota. The economy of an entire town depends on reserve, which mines iron ore and dumps its wastes into Lake Superior. Bob Jameson has that story.
Reserve came to northern Minnesota in the early 1950s and carved an iron mine out of the forest. To process the ore, Reserve built a plant at Silver Bay, a little spot along the shore of Lake Superior known to few people other than fishermen. Silver Bay suddenly became a town, totally dependent on the company. A grateful state gave Reserve permission to dump the waste rock from its processing plant into Lake Superior. The area prospered while every day Reserve dumped more than 60,000 tons of iron ore waste into the lake. Environmentalists complained about the dumping, but nothing much happened even though the federal government brought suit to end it in 1972. But the efforts to end Reserve's dumping of waste gained real momentum last year, when Lake Superior was found to contain asbestos fibers. The same lake that is the source of drinking water for nearly 250,000 people in 6 different communities, including Duluth, Minnesota, now contain fibers that have been linked to cancer. Tests showed the asbestos fibers came from Reserve's wastes. That issue became crucial in the 9-month-long trial before federal judge Miles Lord. He ruled Reserve's operation was a health hazard and ordered the plant closed, only to see it reopened by appeals judges 2 days later. Reserve officials who have refused to comment on the case argued in court that there is no health hazard, and they threatened to close the plant, saying they cannot afford to dump the waste elsewhere. But Minnesota's chief environmentalist says the company is blatantly irresponsible.
Of course, the profits are incredible, to the point where apparently they disregard human life, public health, in favor of paying stockholders these continued enormous dividends.
Residents of the area are still drinking Lake Superior water. The Army Corps of Engineers, however, is hurriedly installing temporary filters in public places like restaurants and schools to remove asbestos fibers. Most parties to the controversy believe the appellate judges will keep the plant open, so life in Silver Bay will continue much as it did before the controversy began, and so too will the dumping of iron ore wastes into Lake Superior. Bob Jamison, NBC News, Silver Bay, Minnesota.
We found this video online through the Vanderbilt Television News Archive in Tennessee, and I didn't think much of it. I just thought maybe this would be a good resource to have. I just found it while I was surfing the internet for information about the case, and they sent us a video in the mail, and it actually turned out to be really valuable, and we showed it with our exhibit. And the judges that you talk to at every level of the competition really thought that was a pretty cool thing. We're going to pass around our annotated bibliography. It's it's just kind of the documentation of all the research we did, and it's got our process paper in there too, which is just about our process.
Well, you gotta tell us how long the company lasted before it closed down.
It's still running, except it's owned by a different company. It's called North Shore Mining now, and they do not dump the tailings into Lake Superior. Instead, they have a inland disposal pond called Milepost 7.
Miles Lord says that's made of more of the same, but I guess there's still some problems revolving around taconite tailings and things like that. We'll talk about that in a second, but real quick, Mikhail's going to explain the competition, like the different levels of it.
The way we ended up winning, which we forgot to talk about, was first of all, we started out, had a school competition at Fridley High School, and majority of the people get to go to regional competition, which is, we went to southwestern Minnesota or southeastern Minnesota?
South Central.
South Central, in between, South Central Minnesota competition, which is actually the one we're not supposed to go to, but since we start out later than most students, we end up going to that one because it's the last one before state. And so this one in our bracket, which was senior group exhibit, there was about 100, 200 competition, 200.
Probably, 200, 250 or something.
About 200 boards we were competing against, and only 7 or 8 of those boards got to go to state. And then at state,
This is the regional medal. Go ahead.
At state, then we were competing at just around 100 people, and we ended up taking first place. And only first and second place get to go to nationals, which was pretty exciting. I mean, we thought it was just amazing that we even got first at state, but now we get to go to Washington, D.C. and compete with the rest of the nation, and give it a good time. Beginning of this past summer, June 9th,
I believe it was, we flew out to Washington, D.C., did a little touring, and then settled down at our dorms at the University of Maryland, where the competition is held. Basically, we had 1 day of judging, which is where we show our board to a few judges. It's just a private thing. There's not a crowd or anything. We show our board to, I think there were two or three judges, and they ask us questions about our board and things like that. And after that's over, you kind of have to sweat it out for a few days before the results are revealed. And there's a big award ceremony. I think it was on the History Channel website and stuff like that. And you could just kind of sense everyone kind of nerves were up and everything like that. And we weren't really expecting anything, but sure enough, they announced the Rachel Carson Centennial Award
Sponsored by the Fish and
sponsored by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for an excellent entry in environmental history, and we won that, and that was actually $1,000. And so we were really excited. We were satisfied, ready to go home at that point. And then
They started announcing.
yeah, and then they go.
Then they started announcing senior group exhibit results, and third place goes by, and then second place goes by, and we're still like hoping, but we're not expecting anything great. And then all of a sudden, the announcer's like, from Fridley High School, and we were just shocked, and I didn't even know what to do.
So yeah, these are the medals for that. 2 medals, 2 awards. So yeah, that was really exciting. And now I think our board is, it's been a couple different places. We took it up to Chisholm, which is my mom's hometown, up on the Iron Range, because she thought that a newspaper up on the Iron Range should have pictures of this. So they took pictures of it, and it was in the Chisholm newspaper. And then we brought it here, and I think it's going to have kind of a permanent home at the Minnesota Historical Society. They said they'd buy it for $1. One more thing we wanted to mention is that this whole thing seemed like it kind of reached a conclusion when Reserve was forced to build an on-land disposal plant. But Miles Lord wouldn't be happy with us if we failed to mention that there are still some continuing struggles with the taconite tailings. And one of those things is that I guess they're using taconite tailings for road construction. They're putting them in roads and things like
the base gravel part.
Yeah, they're using it to build roads, and Miles Lord is kind of fighting against that right now. And you may have heard in the news recently that the Minnesota Health Commissioner, or I don't know what her official title is, but she resigned because the state failed to release records of mesothelioma on the Iron Range, which is caused by asbestos. And asbestos is the stuff that comes out of taconite tailings, and it was mostly seen in mine workers and things and people like that. But Miles Lord is kind of fighting against, or when we interviewed him anyways, this was before that reached the news, but he told us that the Reserve Mining Company kind of hushed all those records up, and it finally came out this many years later. So
Pond that goes in the tributaries.
Also the on-land disposal plant, or pond, a little bit of the water in there, which is extremely polluted, can sometimes trickle into tributaries and rivers that go into Lake Superior and Lake Vermilion. And that's another problem that we're having to deal with.
Otherwise, if you guys have any questions for us, we can answer them.
You'll be congratulated and so forth, but the teacher may come forward. Did you try to get anybody from reserve mining, somebody else on the other side to interview?
Yeah, we thought about that, and then we looked at how hard it was for reporters back then to talk to reserve mining administrators. You saw the video of them kind of pushing away the cameras, and we thought they'd be a little too bitter about the whole thing, and we didn't want to really cause any form of like
But second
violence.
question, I understand what you're saying. Second question, Miles Lord, the Judge Lord, didn't come across very impartial. From your talk with him, do you think he went into that trial on an impartial basis?
Yeah, we asked him that question directly. We said, some people have called you an activist judge, and he said, I wouldn't say I'm an activist judge, but I'm a judge who wanted to make a point or something like that. And
So he had his opinion.
yeah, he definitely was a pretty opinionated guy, and he was reprimanded for his actions in that trial. That's one reason why his ruling was stayed, and so I guess he was kind of threatened by the judges above him, but yeah, so.
Thank you.
Grant Merritt, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I just, having spent 13 years fighting the company, I'd just like to say I think that the Delta, which is now owned by the state of Minnesota, you saw it in the picture there, ought to be named after Kiehlor and Mack. It was just a joy to see them work. They did actually go up to Babbitt, by the way, or up to Silver Bay, and talk to people from the Silver Bay side. So I think they did a really good, balanced job here. And the final thing, I could go on for quite a while, but I happened to have been driving to Duluth the day of the decision that they won the national competition. And I had pulled off at Spirit Mountain to take a little rest. I was tired, so I was out in the field. But I had my cell phone. It started to ring, and here's their father, Stan Mack, who happens to be our school superintendent where I live in New Hope, called and told me about the big celebration. And I was obviously so excited for them. They just did a wonderful job.
In about January, with just a quick presentation by Mr. Holt and Mr. Kari. We got our topic right like a few weeks before February, and then we got right into research because the first competition was in March, so we didn't have that much time. And so there was a few 3 o'clock nights before the competition. Then they canceled it or delayed it at our school because of a snowstorm. Yeah, that was right. Snowstorm.
And so that night we had stayed up till 3 a.m. finishing it.
So we were pretty disappointed about that.
Yeah.
But that gives us more time to work on it, so that was nice. And then once that was done, we continuously kept researching and improving, and we just didn't, this wasn't our school competition board at all. It was close, but there's at least 10 or 15 differences, and our bibliography grew by about 25%, and by the time we got to nationals, it was pretty impressive. Huge. What was that about? I was about to say something. Let's see, that's 6 months, almost 6 months.
And if I could quickly point out, I didn't have them, and we started second trimester. And a lot of the students they competed against would have started the summer before. Some of the real hardcore ones started in the summer before. So they had quite a delay there, and they're going up against 9th through 12th graders. So being that the youngest part of that division, it was really an accomplishment.
What is the name of the community where the tailings are now being dumped?
Well, the pond is called Milepost 7. I think it's just really rural area, but it's a really big disposal pond, just like 7 miles away from Silver Bay.
Yeah, I remember vaguely now because this hasn't been, in the fore for years, but I remember at the time when they were trying to decide someplace to put it, or reach some kind of an understanding, someplace they put it, and at that time Governor Wendell Anderson was expected to take leadership, and both political parties, main parties, are criticizing him for the lack of going forward and leading this to get something going on it, and of course then they finally did. And now it comes to my mind when you said Milepost 7, I remember that. You fellows have done a great job, and I just want to say I helped with one of you in first grade, with Cheryl Anderson. And then your older brother was my first grade when I retired. And I'm privileged to know your mother and your dad, but I know the whole community here, the school, your classmates, and Fridley and this school. We're all very proud to know you. Thank you. Great job you did.
What a super presentation. Very, very happy that you could come. And their parents, in fact, their family, Stan Mack and Margaret Leifrid, are members of the Fridley Historical Society. So we take a little bit of pride as a historical society of having a member winning this fantastic award. I don't know if any of you have ever been up to Spirit Mountain. I was involved with trying to find a hotel way back in the 1960s to be built there, and walking along the railroad tracks, all of these taconite pellets are still there, and so you can still find them. The other connection I had with this was also back in the 1970s. I had a client, John DeLight, who owned all the land. It was what is now known as Tetigoosh State Park, and that was a private reserve of lumber barons. And he was the last surviving lumber baron, and he wanted to sell it to the county for a park, but they didn't want to pay for it. So he wanted me to go up and find a developer that would create some interest up there, scare the county and the state into buying the property. But he had a price of $2.5 million. They only paid about $700,000. But the problem, one of the developers that came up there found out that there's 3 lakes on that Tetigoosh property, and they'd never had a boat on them. They're perfectly clear. But where they were dumping the taconite pellets and all the scrap, it was leaching through the groundwater. And so they were very fearful that it was going to contaminate all those lakes in Tetigoosh. So, okay, moving right along, Pam Meyer, would you like to give us your presentation? Am I correct? And you just retired this year?
Right.
Very good. So a well-known and respected Fridley teacher, Pam Meyer.
This is a tough act to follow. But after listening to you speak, I know why I love my job so much. Because you kids are what make it the way it is. And congratulations, it's wonderful. So, thank you for having me here tonight. The last time I was here was about, I don't know how many years ago. Fridley was celebrating their 50th anniversary, and my students had decided, after studying about Fridley, they were doing some studying too, and Jerry Ryder sent out a letter stating that you people needed a roof, and my students decided that they wanted to raise some money, and I got out my newspaper, but I guess I didn't need to because it's over on the wall over there. And this is the timeline that my students put together. I forgot that we'd done that. And I think that there is something in a time capsule that my students made that will be, I hope I'm alive. It's open. I think it's going to be opened maybe at the 75th. I'm not sure. But I have pictures, I have larger pictures of the students. And they came over, they were so excited. They raised $104, I think. We brought it over in actually a plastic bag. So that was a lot of fun. And then we took a little tour of Fridley that day, and so it's fun to come here and see everything. Dorothy had asked that I would come here and talk about some of the students that have gone through Fridley. And when I started in Fridley, well, this is kind of good news, bad news. I'm old enough to retire, but now that means I'm old enough to be a historian also, which is kind of sad. But when I started in Fridley, there were 6 elementary schools. And they just gradually kept closing down because of decline in enrollment. And I'm going to throw out some names. I worked with people such as Lee Switzer at Parkview Elementary, where I had Nancy Relke Simino, who is here tonight. I had her in 1st grade, and she, I'm so lucky that she also taught with me in the end of my career. So that was a full, now we rip it up on the golf course together. So that's kind of fun. And of course, Jerry Ryder, I taught with him, and Dean Habel, and I bet lots of you know those names. So, and I still keep in touch with Dean Habel. He is living in Hayward, Wisconsin, and so I get to see him every once in a while. So I am going to go ahead. I was frantically looking through my box that I keep special things in, and some things just stand out more than others. And I have a letter here that I'd gotten a couple of years ago from a student of mine. When she was in 3rd grade, her family had immigrated from Vietnam, and she was at that time, she had very limited English. When she came into 3rd grade, she spoke a little English, but not a lot. This was a letter that I got from her. I'm just going to read part of it here. She thanked me for being her teacher. And she said, although I have strayed a little from the teaching course, I haven't strayed too far. I graduated from the College of St. Benedict in May 2003 with a Bachelor of Arts in Biochemistry, 1 year earlier than my anticipated graduation. I had intentions initially of going to medical school, but decided that that was not my path. Instead, I am taking some time off and doing cancer research at the University of Minnesota. I am planning to go back to graduate school to get my PhD in chemistry so that I may become a college professor. I was a TA and a tutor doing my undergrad and had remembered how much I liked helping students understand. There is no feeling like seeing the sight of recognition in their eyes, which I am positive you are familiar with. And you know, some of these things just knock your socks off. When the best thing in the world to me is when I hear back from students. I love that, and find out what they're doing. And I have a sign. Oh, I had a sign. I still think I'm teaching. I had a sign outside my door in my hallway, and it said to prepare the child for the path and not the path for the child. And you can see by these young men here that they are walking their own path, and they're choosing the right one. And I brought a little girl with me tonight. I call in the troops, I'll tell you when I need it. And she is choosing the right path too, as Nancy did. So a little bit of a background. Every year I did the same thing. In the fall of the year, we would start out writing these someday books, and they were called Someday. And each one of my children made one. They made their own, and they wrote down in their book things that they were going to do and achieve in their life. And then they gave it to someone. And this year I got mine from Katie. She dedicated it to me. I tried to talk her out of it, but she wouldn't hear of it. So, want to come on up? This is Katie Stevens. Stevenson from Stevenson. So, honey, do you want to tell them, your dad shared with me something that you did with this book this summer. Do you want to tell them what you did?
I took it to the Anoka County Fair and showed it there.
And then what happened?
I got a blue ribbon for it.
Share your book, and then it'll kind of lead into this other one that I want to read.
Someday, written and illustrated by Katie Stevenson. Dedicated to Miss Meyer, the best teacher in the world. Someday, I will be a veterinarian with wild animals and pets, and I will open my own animal rescue farm where I will treat every animal, big and small. Someday, I will have 6 kids, and they will all be twins, 4 girls and 2 boys. It will be a lot to handle, but I will be able to do it because I am capable like my mom. Someday I will play the piano like I've never played before, and everybody will come to my concerts. Someday I will fly to my favorite vacation spot, Colorado, and I will see wild horses run free on the open land in the Rocky Mountains. Someday I will breed Siberian Huskies and have a team of 12, and my lead husky will be named Kiara. But right now I have to go to bed.
And I didn't teach her to read upside down. She learned that all by herself. So jumping off of that, when I retired this last year, I have a dear friend, Jane Stiefel, who worked in my room, and for a number of years she would come in and she would help me with these books. And they were a lot of work, and we always would wonder why in the world we did them until they got them done, and they looked like this, and they were a treasure for anyone who got them, I believe. So she put out on the internet that I was retiring, and so it kind of traveled from kid to kid to kid, and I got my own Someday book, and this is from students, and this is what they really are doing right now. So this is just a treasure to me. I couldn't believe it. So this one's dedicated to me, and they actually sent pictures, and some of the names you will probably recognize. Someday I will work with my dad at Old Dominion Trucking Company and fish for muskies. That's Corey Donnelly. And that was him in 3rd grade, and then him now. Someday I will study biomedical engineering at Mayo Graduate School, and that's Casey Johnson. There's a picture, he's with the statue sitting out in front of Mayo. Someday I will be a student at the Medical College of Wisconsin and run in marathons. Andy Keenan. You'll recognize a lot of these. Someday I will be an ocean engineer, scuba dive on the job, and work with submarines. Ian Stiefel. Someday I will be a financial advisor. Corey Kelsenberg. Someday, the income generated from my illustrious career, which remains uncertain, will be given back to the community and used to touch the lives of those less fortunate. Eric Adolfson. These pictures are amazing. Someday I will study malaria in Kenya before beginning medical school. Matt McCara. Someday I will be an auditor for the Minnesota State Auditor, Steve Hines. Those two were in my class and they're getting married. Kind of fun. Someday I will be an English language teacher at a junior high school in Japan, Debbie Moravitz. Someday I will be a travel nurse, being able to see the world. Gina Adolfson. She's holding a koala bear there. Someday I will work with troubled children, train as a psychologist, visit New Zealand, learn to snowboard, play guitar, and have a pet cat. Peter Keenan. And he's on top of a mountain in New Zealand. There. Someday I will be a student athlete at St. John's University. Russell Glyden. Someday I will be a consultant in software development for Talent Software Services, currently working at United Health. Shane Kavanaugh. Someday I will be a theatrical performer. Kirby Ann Trimucha. Someday I will be a teacher, and I will strive to be as good of a teacher as Mrs. Meyer. Leah Massey. Someday I will be a psychology student and study in Greece. Anna Johnson. Someday I will be a microbiologist in sterilization services at Medtronic Incorporated. Ryan Kavanaugh. Someday I will be a doctor and work in South Africa. Joe Keenan. He delivers babies over there. Someday I will be a high school math teacher. Christine Nalepka. I believe she's still in high school. She's okay. And she's thinking about going into that. Someday I will be a financial advisor and have the opportunity to help people achieve their financial goals. Marissa Clares. Only kid I ever had that didn't like pizza. It's weird the things you remember about kids. Someday I will be a student at Gustavus play Stefano in Shakespeare's The Tempest and major in religion and minor in theater. Michael Sela.
I'll be done.
Someday I will be in law enforcement. Matt Nalepka. Someday I will be a mechanical engineer working in the Cardiac Rhythm Management Department of Boston Scientific. And his mom ran that picture down apparently right after he had graduated. It's in front of Northrop Auditorium. Mark Stevenson. No relation to you, though, I don't think. Someday I will be a computer programmer, make the internet more useful, and coach the Fridley swim team. Mark Seeloff. Someday I will be a doctor of optometry. Todd Kavanaugh. Someday I will be a massage therapist. Carrie Moore. Someday I will be an actuary and a dad. Danny Nalepka. He just graduated. Wrote me a letter when he graduated. And someday I will be a marketing assistant at United Bankers Bank. And that's Ellie Filer. Engaged to Steve Heinz. Someday I will be engaged to be married. Aaron will be an interior designer and Ryan a project manager for Ryan Electric. Aaron Kostick and Ryan Holohan. She stopped by the day she got her diamond to show me. But someday I will be a nurse, anesthetist. I can't say that. She's going to do that. She's going to put her to sleep. Christy Herman. Someday I will go to school to be a medical assistant. This is another high school student, Amanda Holohan. But right now, thanks for inspiring and helping shape our lives. Congratulations on a job well done and enjoy your retirement. Which I am. It's fun. But I just want to say, you know, I'm only one teacher, and every teacher in Fridley has stories like this. And when you think about that, all the lives that our students have touched and how they're giving back to the community and the world, and thank you for caring about our world, and we're going to be better off because of you kids, so thanks so much.
How many kids did you have in Fridley? Approximately.
I taught 37 years, and you know, it would be about 900.
Yeah.
Yeah. My husband won't go to the 49ers parade with me. Because he says, I think I miss Fridley. But I've loved it. When I retired, I thought, you know, I'm one of the lucky ones because I landed a job that I absolutely loved. And it was just fun to go to work every day, and not a lot of people have that opportunity, and so that's why it was hard to leave. So
you never saw so many kids crying the last year.
yeah, including me. So yeah, one historical note I thought you guys might be interested in. I was over in at Parkview the year that we had that. You guys are all about storms here, so I was at Parkview in, I believe, 1975. We had those straight line winds, and all the windows in my classroom blew in. We had just sent the kids home and told them to run like crazy. and then they got home. Luckily, they all got home fine, but we were still at school, and all the windows blew in. So yeah, so that was kind of interesting. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Pam. I always wanted to meet the teacher that helped students put on this beautiful timeline here. So unfortunately, we've got it all covered up with other things right now. But it's one of the things when we have people that come to visit the museum for the first time, many of them just start right over in the corner and walk it all the way across. So we're very grateful for that contribution. I think we're going to pass on talking about Fridley youth organizations. We're just about out of tape to begin with, and I'll give you a little more time to talk about. We're going to do a history conversation just on Fridley organizations, you know, Lions clubs and Rotary clubs and Kiwanis clubs and JCs. And, you know, the youth organizations, it was actually a Fridley Youth Center that we started back in about 1950, as I recall, at the brand new village hall that had just been built. And I know there was a 4-H club that met here downstairs, right in this room.
And there still is a Fridley 4-H club.
And there still is a Fridley 4-H club. I was a member of the very first Fridley Boy Scout troop. We didn't have Cub Scouts, but we did start a Boy Scout troop in 1948, and we met also here in this building. And I'll just tell you one little story about that, because I think about 4 minutes left on the tape. We were up to go to Camp Many Point, which is where all the Boy Scout troops go in Minnesota back then, for a real living outdoors intense experience. Well, this was very close to the 4th of July. When we pulled into Many Point, one of the boys on the bus had some sparklers. And so it was getting towards evening, and so while our scoutmaster went in to register us, he threw this sparkler up in the air. It landed on a tent of another group and started the tent on fire, which we went over and put out and got credit for putting out the fire without anybody knowing who started it. And then, just so that our karma was carried out appropriately, the scoutmasters took us to the place where we were to pitch our tents. And, you know, there were no facilities. I mean, you went to the bathroom outdoor, over logs, all the rest of it. And We all got up the next morning, we got to have breakfast, and we looked around, and we were in a patch of poison ivy. And we had poison ivy on every inch of our bodies for the whole time we were there. It was not fun. So our karma was enacted. Any questions or comments before we close? We do have refreshments. We have cookies. We have coffee. Is that right, Mary Sue? Yeah, she's coming. Okay, we're going to have coffee and cookies, so stick around and talk to our speakers, Mikhail and Kiehlor and Pam, if you'd like to. And we look forward to seeing you at our annual meeting coming up October 10th. And where is it going to be?
It is going to be at the community center.
Our board meeting was Thursday night. We still don't know because they're remodeling. They're taking all the asbestos out of Parkview School. And the whole school's been ripped up all summer, and we weren't sure where we were going to have our annual meeting. But now we will, and it is a potluck, and it's the biggest potluck of the year. So we hope you can all attend. And thank you very much for coming tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again. Good night. Oh, yes?
About the coffee. The coffee was plugged in a very long time ago, so it's not really hot, and neither one of us who made it know how to make coffee.
Not a problem.
I don't know if it's drinking.
I have a little bottle in the trunk of my car that might spice it up.